do you do when your heart is done, but your paycheck still says pastor? Today's guest, Tim Stephens, has served in some of the most influential churches in America. Granger Community Church, Willow Creek. He's been part of the executive search firm Vanderbloemen, which specializes in helping churches and nonprofits find and place their leaders. And really, Tim has seen leadership transitions from every side, on the platform, behind the curtain, and in the crosshairs. In this episode of Life After Ministry, Tim gets candid about the identity crisis, the quiet grief, and public fallout that come with ministry transitions. And now, through Leading Smart, he's helping churches and leaders navigate these moments with wisdom and structure and even a little grace. If you've ever felt the slow drift of misalignment, or you've faced the pain of leaving something that you helped build, listen up. This one's for you. Welcome to the Life After Ministry podcast. Well, hey, Tim Stephens, welcome to the Life After Ministry podcast. Good to have you here.
Glad to be here. Really am.
And we have a couple things to talk about here today. But most importantly is I'd like to talk about pickleball and ministry and how those two actually come together.
Pickleball's, you might know this, is one of my favorite topics.
I do know this. That's why I want
to. It's definitely top 5. Notre Dame's up there too, but we can talk about pickleball. But yeah, I mean, I try to play. I've never been one that loves exercise. People run and they think they love the burn, workout. I hate the burn. I hate it all, but I love pickleball. So I try 2 to 3 days a week to play for about an hour and a half. And can't say enough about it. Do you play?
I have a game against my boys tonight, and they're both taller and faster than me. Any strategy moves that I should be thinking about? And we're both probably about the same height. So how do you really go in and score a point?
Well, you've noticed that the more knee braces, elbow braces, and the more aging someone has, they tend to be better.
Yeah.
So I think you've got. I'm not saying that you're crippled and old. I'm just saying that you can probably use wisdom and experience to best them on the court.
That's good. Thank you. I'm going to take that with me.
Okay.
I threw a curveball right there in the beginning there. Hey, Tim, our journey started together, I don't know, maybe 6-7 years ago. And I myself found myself in transition. You did not get the same version of me as I am at today. I was very much trying to find my way. And I got to spend a day in Houston, Texas. I did a battery of interviews at this place called Vanderbloemen, and you graciously walked me through that season. And you've been through some of your own transition seasons yourself. By the way, I did not get the job at Vanderbloemen.
And
thank you.
You're glad you didn't, right? Because the guy that we hired, we unhired right when COVID hit.
That's right. And by the way, he's a good friend, and we're going to have him on the podcast coming up soon too.
So horrible. We hired him I don't remember the date. I want to say March 12th. The world ended on March 16th or something like that.
Yeah.
And then 3 days later, we called and said, "Hey, that job offer? We need to rescind it because we're not sure anyone's ever going to hire us again."
That's right. Yeah. So it's maybe a good thing to think through and talk about, because I was very much in transition. I thought I'm never going to be doing anything in ministry. In fact, the reason we named this podcast Life After Ministry was because I thought there is no life after ministry. And coming in there and really put all of my eggs, after all the other jobs I didn't want, whether that's the Home Depot and Starbucks shifts, this is one I really did want, because I could still keep my foot in the ministry space and door and talk to pastors and hang out. And the letdown of not just me, but my whole family going through that process, was a hard day. And then COVID happened. But this is not something that is unfamiliar to you. You have had transition seasons. How has that gone for you?
Yeah, it varies. This month is marks my 40th year in ministry. And what I'm doing now, which is what I launched 2 years ago, is my 5th role, or fifth employer, so to speak. So it's been interesting. I was 9 years at a nonprofit ministry, and I was 20 years as an executive pastor at a church, 6 years down in Houston when our paths crossed, working with Vanderbloemen, almost 4 years at Willow Creek as executive pastor, and then launched this 2 years ago. So it's all been a little bit different. It's interesting. And I don't know if you've talked about this on your podcast or not, but my experience in every leave, every departure, whether my own or, especially with Vanderbloemen, the hundreds of people we kind of talked through transitions, there's always a bit of a push and a pull involved in that. Even if the pull is like I would say my pull to Willow was absolutely a strong pull. It was like just I was being called to that. It's probably the only time I've ever felt actually called. Every other transition felt like the right next step. Mm-hmm. But I was like, my heart was just there. And like, I needed, and I had to say yes to that, to jump in and kind of help with the turnaround. But there was still a little bit of a push. There's always something of like, in any job you're ever in, there's like a sense of like, this thing annoys me. That group annoys me. I don't like my board. I can't wait to get away from this staff P or whatever. There's always a little bit of a push. And sometimes it's a big push where it's like, when I left Granger, which I was there for 20 years, thought I was going to be there till the day I died. And just there was a shift in like where we were completely in sync, like with leadership philosophy and a lot of ministry philosophy. We just kind of, me and the lead pastor just kind of were doing that. And if you're listening by audio, I'm moving my hands apart. And so we just weren't in sync anymore. And so it was a push. It was like, I just don't think like I'm gonna end up being an annoyance to this guy if I stay. And I never want to be that, especially in that second chair role. And so it's like I didn't feel pulled to anything at that point. I just felt like I have to leave. And so my leader there and I started talking probably a year before I actually pulled the trigger on that, and just kind of like, what can we figure out? And is there a way to get back in alignment? He was super gracious and open in that conversation. And I finally said, I've got to leave. And I didn't know where I was going. I just, and he and the church were super gracious. They kept me on for months as I kind of raised up my replacement and helped kind of pass on institutional knowledge to them. But there's a little of that. That's one thing that's kind of stuck with me is a little bit of the push and the pull.
Because there are people who are listening who are in that transition season. What did you do during those months where you're trying to figure it out? Like, are you like pulling the eject button? I'm out of ministry altogether. Are you looking at Home Depot? How do you piece together those pieces of your life? And was it an existential crisis? Like, did you have to go get counseling and like, what am I here for? What's going on?
Yeah, probably the one to maybe drill in a little bit is because it's where I spent the most time, was going from Granger and then eventually moving down to Houston. Man, there was so much angst in that decision. I had found, I understand this more now than I did at the time, but like my identity and that place were one and the same. Like it was, so therefore when you walk away, you got to disentangle that, and it is painful. And there's a lot of grieving and a lot of sense, because I got there when the church was super small. And so, by the time I left, we had 6,000 and lots and lots of staff. And so it wasn't, I wasn't walking away from my job. I was walking away for something I'd built. And so, and a lot of probably in unhealthy codependence with the lead pastor, where, he, like, I think he was unhealthily codependent on me and I on him. And so then it's hard to just separate, job and decisions for the church from personal relationship. And, we vacationed together every year with our spouses for 10 years straight. I didn't have a closer best friend at the time. And so just that identity piece was probably it. So it took months of agonizing over that decision. I remember, over the time I'd been there, I'd gotten, lots of calls of people like, hey, we're looking for this person here, this person there. You might fit it. Are you interested? I didn't even answer the calls, or there was a very short conversation. And I was sitting at my desk, and this is 13 months before I ultimately made the decision to leave. And I'm sitting at my desk, and I get a call from a headhunter for John Ortberg out at Menlo Park for his church. They're looking for executive pastor. It's like 32 below zero in February, in northern Indiana. And I've just gone through some like really tough conversations where I'm just realizing we're just not in alignment anymore. We see things differently. No one was doing anything immoral. It's just we didn't see things the same anymore. And so it was the first time I was like, oh, I should take this call. And then I had 3 or 4 or 5 conversations over the next 30 days with this person and with John. And ultimately it's like, now's not the right time. I'm going to go around the lap one more time and see if we can make this thing work. Cause again, I did plan to be there for a long time, but that's just like, so that was, over a year of, agonizing over that decision. I had a good buddy. You may know Doug Slaybaugh from Southern California, and Doug has been a mentor to me for 25 years. And Doug, in that season, he was super close to our church. He'd been in our leadership team meetings. He, consulted with us a ton, and so talking to him a lot. At one point, he just says to me, he says, "Tim, you're done." I'm like, "What do you mean I'm done?" He says, "You can't come back from this. Like, you are mentally and emotionally, your heart is done." And I said, no, it's not. Like, I'm still, I have to stay. And I felt very called. I felt like it was almost like a vision from God, maybe just short of that I wanted to be there through this succession of my senior pastor. He was 14 years older than me. And that I wanted to help the church get to the healthy side of the succession on the other side of that. And he's like, you can't do it. Like, you can't be the one to do that. It's always going to be 5 years away. It's never going to happen. And a month after that, I just remember I stayed up all night sitting on my lazy boy in my living room and just agonizing over this. And then just finally, I've got to be done. It's so hard to get there. But once I got there, and it was probably 6 or 8 days later that I, met with my lead pastor and we spent 12 hours. It was a 12-hour meeting. Because it was emotional and he didn't want to talk about it. And is there any way we can make this work? And by that time, I just knew that I knew that, and I just kept saying, you need a different leader next to you. You need someone that can help you execute your vision that's aligned with you leadership philosophy wise. And I can't be that person for the next season.
Is this you? Like, do you normally like that? That's a long process, right? Like, are you slow to make decisions normally? Or is this like, man, I don't know what's going on with me with all this?
So 2 sides of that answer. If I'm buying a TV, I'm going to research it for 3 years. Not as bad as I used to be, but I'm an Enneagram 5. I love to I go deep into the rabbit hole of research. I almost enjoy the research more than the conquering and the actual purchase.
Right.
There's a bit of that, but in my vocational life, I can get there pretty quickly. I try to collaborate and get consensus, but I can get there pretty quickly. But I'm also an Enneagram 5 wing 6, if you know anything about the Enneagram, loyal to a fault. And so I probably outstayed, how long I should have been at Granger, probably by a couple of years. Just because it's like, man, like I want to be here until the end. I mean, I want to see this thing. And so that was the untangling of the identity that was happening then. And it took 2 years after that really to completely untangle. It's interesting going into Vanderbloemen and then into Willow. I don't think I especially at Vanderbloemen, I didn't consciously go in and say, I've got to keep my identity separate, but it just was easier to do. It was like, and with Willow Creek as well, it's like, this is something I'm doing. I'm going to be here for, as far as the history of this organization, I'm going to be here just for a season. Mm-hmm. And my season might be 2 years, might be 20 years, but it's going to be a season and it's going to end. I am an interim. And it enabled me to kind of like almost be a little bit just in a healthier place with both those organizations.
Yeah. So when you're looking at Vanderbloemen and you're working with so many different kinds of organizations and churches and really the size, are there similarities? And are there differences? What kind of through lines did you see in this world of transition and people going in and out that you gleaned from the Vanderbloemen years?
It's a good question. I think, talking probably literally thousands of people through transitions in that season. I'm trying to think. I haven't had that question before. I guess some differences that come immediately to mind, like with a larger organization, you're a little bit more, doesn't really matter how long you've been there. You're a little bit more of a cog in a wheel. You can definitely feel that, even if the organization doesn't communicate that or doesn't feel that, you can feel it, that you're a little bit more of a cog in a wheel. And also, if you've been there for a while, you've seen people that were, supposedly quote unquote irreplaceable, or, they're part of the fabric of this ministry, leave. And like 12 seconds later, they've got a replacement and they're moving on. And so there's a little sense of that of like, yeah. Whereas a smaller organization, I met with a church board last night, and they're running 60 people, and they've got 2 full-time and a couple part-time. And the senior pastor's been there 25 years and looking to transition the next 3 years. And so that's a big deal. I mean, that's a super big deal for a church that size. Right. And he's carrying the weight of that. He knows that, and wants to do it well. So that's the thing that comes to mind when you ask that question. There's probably other things at play there.
You came in after Willow, and people know of Willow before Bill Hybels and Willow after. And you got to see both, but you were part of the installation of the new senior pastor, and you came in. And what was that season like? A little bit of cleanup, perhaps, and adjusting culture, and what it's like aftermath of a war, I imagine.
Yeah, everything was on fire. Like everything. Yeah, I've not been in the military. I don't know what war is like, but it's a sense of like you go into a place after it's been completely decimated and bombed to the ground, and people are hurting, and people are gone, and every metric that you measure church health was declining fast. And so, plus we were shut down in COVID, so we actually got there with 0 people attending. And for the first 13 months, never saw people in the building. And so for the first 5 months, never met the staff face to face until we could do some outdoor things. So it was a really dark place. Now, the thing that, that helped me is prior to that, I worked with the elders for like 9 months as we were doing the senior pastor search, and they showed me everything. They like all the stuff that was, public media and stuff that wasn't. And just like, so I knew what I was walking into. The 2 things I didn't know that were huge was COVID. I didn't know COVID was going to last. I mean, when Dave and I took the role, we both said, which was first week of April, we both said we'll be back in our services by Easter. It's like we'll be open by Easter. Well, we weren't open by the next Easter. So. And then the other thing I didn't know is just the George Floyd murder, and obviously all of the racial tension that really impacted our team, our staff, our congregation, our city in a huge way, and all the politicization. There's a better word for the politics. Let's go with that. All of the politics around COVID and masks and vaccines and all the stuff that affected every church everywhere. And we had, campuses in super conservative counties and campuses in the heart of the city that were super progressive. So that was, layered on that. The other thing that we had the idea that Willow was draining money week to week, but had been very conservative and planned well, and so a lot of reserves. And so knowing that, we went in thinking that we probably had 2 to 5 years to turn this thing around before we'd be financially in trouble. About less than 2 months in, our CFO just said, we've got probably less than 18 months. And so all of the right things to do when you go into an existing organization is, don't change anything, win influence, get to know people, earn trust, don't make any big changes for the first year. We're like 2 months in thinking like, we're not even going to be open potentially for the first year. And so we can't earn people's trust based on A, time, and B, we can't even get in the room with them. So we had to start making changes before we'd earn the right to be trusted by them. And they're looking at us like, who are you yahoos coming in from who knows where? But all the people they trusted had left. And so, the congregation was hurting, the staff was hurting. A lot of work to do, back to your question.
Yeah. So you started this thing called Leading Smart, and you've been doing it the last couple of years. What was the impetus? What got you started doing that? And what's the work that you're doing in the church world?
So it was a side hustle for me for 20 maybe 5 years, 25 years. And this was back when Tony Morgan and I were doing ministry together, and he'd started a blog. And this was, back when blogs were brand new. So he convinced me to start one. And I just called it Leading Smart. I don't even remember why I picked the name at the time, but so initially it was a blog. It was just a place I love to write. I'm not a preacher or communicator, but I love to, I shouldn't say I'm not a communicator. I love to written communication. And so it was just an outlet for me to what I'm learning and thinking, putting a blog. And so then eventually that kind of picked up into, then Tony and I wrote a few books together. So then that picked up into, hey, can you come speak? And so we'd start doing some workshops and seminars, and that turned into, can you coach? And then I started putting executive pastor cohorts together and did that for probably 20 years while I was at Granger. Took it with me when I went to Willow, to Vanderbloemen, and then took it with me when I went to Willow. Somewhere about the time, maybe 2 years before I left Vanderbloemen and I went to Willow, I started getting the sense it's like, I think I want to help churches full time, under my own shingle someday. And so I loved doing what I was doing with Vanderbloemen, loved the team there, felt very satisfied by that. Didn't love the search part of it, which is 60% of it. So it's like, I don't think I want to do this for the rest of my life, but I do want to serve churches. And so when the Willow thing came up, and it came up super fast, that was probably a 36-hour decision from, do you want to do this, to I think we're supposed to do this. So when that came up, and I was talking to Dave Dunbat about it, and I just said, hey, Dave, if I do this, I'm not going to retire from Willow. I really want to get back to serving churches, not just be at a church. And so we talked about, we figured it'd probably be probably 5 years. And he said at the same time, I'm probably not going to retire from Willow either. I feel called to help turn this thing around. And he thought maybe 10 years. Well, mine ended up being almost 4, and his ended up being 5, a little over 5. But that was the sense of I eventually want to do this full time. And so what is this now? So this is, I'm still doing some coaching and cohorts with executive pastors. Do a virtual cohort. I do some free gatherings a year with executive pastors where we get 30 to 40 pastors together in a room. No talking heads, no speeches. It's all just raising the discussions in the room, getting people talking about what their challenges are and learning from each other. Love doing that. I'm doing one of those for lead pastors now as well. And then do a lot of consulting in the area of really kind of 3 things. One would be board governance issues. A lot of times what that is it's a church that's kind of outgrown their governance model, their elder board or poly, whatever they call it. So, the church I worked with in Palm Springs, they developed their governance, kind of how they were operating when they're about 500 in size, 15 some years ago. And now they're close to 3,000. And they just had outgrown it. And so it was just, they were running into all kinds of issues where the board members had their, hands kind of too deep in the weeds, and the staff wasn't really able to run and make decisions. So it's just go in and kind of just rewrite all of their governance documents and how they operate, and then coach them in those meetings so that they still have the accountability that they know is important, but that the staff is able actually to lead and run the church. So I've been doing that. Someone said, that's just kind of your sweet spot. And I said, it's kind of a dysfunctional sweet spot, because it's oh, wow, a board and a staff are at odds. Who wants to run into that? It's I actually kind of enjoy that. And then I do quite a bit of succession consulting. And what that looks like is usually a long-time or founding pastor. In fact, probably all of the ones we're working with would fit that category. And they're 3 to 5 years out from, I think I'm supposed to step away, or the board thinks I'm supposed to step away, or we've already set a date, or we're just starting to think about it. And just walking with that church and holding their hand very closely. So we're on site with them once every 2 or 3 months for a couple days, and then a lot of meetings in between, working with them and their teams to solve all of the things around that. And then we do some I call it strategic advising. I don't know if that's the best name for it, but we'll come alongside a church. Example, I just finished up an engagement with a church called Bayside in Northern California. So with them for about 18 months. And so I just would work with the senior pastor and the lead team, and I'd be in the room with them once a month for a day or two, solving whatever they're trying to solve. So what they were looking for is just, we want someone who has a ton of experience and who's sat in the seat, but who's objective and not one of us who's from the outside to come and just help us make good decisions. Right. And that's probably, if I did one thing for the rest of my life, that's what I would do. That's I love doing that. And so that's kind of the third kind of thing we're doing with Leading Smart.
That's great. What do you see with the American church today? Where do we need to grow up? Where do we need to batten down the hatches? It feels like the press and the church, we're having problems. What are some of those places that we need some help?
Yeah, I am. I'm an optimist. Someone told me I probably have a little scar from it. They told me that I exude toxic positivity. I'm like, well, thank you. I don't know, but I really typically see the good. And so I'm pretty excited about the church today. Just reading and listening to Carrie Nieuwhof and reading some Barna stuff on the church that's growing with Gen Z, and specifically Gen Z guys. The reports have just come out in the last couple of weeks, and especially in the UK, it went from 6% to 26% of Gen Z guys who are attending church, which is unbelievable after decline for decades. So that's some pretty exciting things there. I think there's some pretty exciting things with just AI and what AI allows us to be able to do better and more efficiently in leading our churches. So that's exciting. I think I saw a stat recently that 25% of churches are 7 years or less away from a transition, a succession, retirement, whatever you want to call it. And so to me, there's a lot of, there could be a lot of angst in that, but we're going to have a lot of young leaders stepping into these roles. And I think that's pretty exciting. And that'll bring some innovation and new ideas and new just energy to the church. So that's my toxic positivity look at the church.
Do you think that those new leaders are ready to jump into those spots? And do you think that the previous generation, the ones who are currently in those seats on their way out, are also ready to move on?
No and no.
Yeah.
And that's where, people like you and me get to come alongside and help them with that. This church I mentioned that I met with last night, I was talking to them about the fact, why is a pastor not ready? Or why do they hang on maybe longer than they should? And it's usually one of two things. It's usually finances and identity. And where I see with identity, finances, they just don't feel financially ready because they started the church and they got paid peanuts for the first 10 years and they didn't get a early retirement plan until they were 42 or something, and they're just not prepared. From the standpoint of identity, it's a lot of it, especially with founding pastors, but anyone who's been in the ministry their whole career, they don't know what else to do. They still have gas in the engine, so a lot of ideas. Maybe they know they're supposed to be done at the church. They know it'd be best for the church, or the church knows it'd be best for them, but they don't know what else to do. And so they're going to come back and meddle. And it's not going to be good for that next leader, especially if they stay in the area or stay in the church. So I talked to a guy recently, he's 48, and he says, I'm probably 15 years away from thinking about succession. What should I do now to prepare? And I said, well, and his wife was sitting with him. I said, well, tell me what you do outside the church. What are your hobbies? And she's like, he doesn't have any. And he's like, yeah, I just do the church. I said, well, that's what you need to do in the next 15 years. You need to find something outside of the church that you enjoy. And it may need to be something that you make money if you're not going to be ready by the time you're 63 or 65. But maybe you'll be financially ready. You still need to find something to pour your time and energy and life into, because otherwise you're not going to help that church transition because you won't be able to let go. Yeah,
I see that. Right. It's that you get stuck with that question of, if I'm not going to do this, what will I do? And if you have one option and that's this job, the church, then I think you get stuck. And when you run out of options, you get depressed. It gets hard. So I totally get that.
Yeah.
We're talking just before we pressed record, and you said something, and I just wanted to get your insight, because you do have such a big bird's eye view of what's happening in the church, and you get to see it from a lot of different places. But I liked hearing this. You said what we're doing with ministry transitions, and especially on the outplacement side of things, when you have to let somebody go, what happens to that person? How do we help them in the areas of career coaching and counseling? And all you said, like, there's nobody doing that. Is that true? And how do leaders, how do we let go of our people and do it well? What have you seen in that space?
Yeah, it's about nothing. Absolutely nothing as far as like what exists. So the closest thing to it, this would have been 20 plus years ago. We went through a financial difficulty at the church in Granger, and we had to let a third of our team go. And I think with our part-time folks, like we had to cut their hours by a third. So there was 8 people that left the team, and then a bunch of people reduced hours. And we thought this was the most innovative thing we'd ever seen at the time or heard of. And we hired an outplacement agency, just a corporate agency that gave them office space and taught them how to build a resume and kind of, gave them, coached them on, how to get their name out there basically. And maybe of the 8 people, maybe 2 people found value in that and took us up on it. That's the only thing I'd ever seen or heard of until I heard about what you guys are doing. And I've been on the other side of having to fire someone for cause or having to let someone go because we just could not afford them anymore. When I got to Willow, we had 495 on staff. We had 0 people in the building because it was COVID. We'd lost 50% of our people. And then we thought it ended up being more like 70% of our people by the time we came out of COVID. So we had to transition about 350 people off of the team over the next 3.5 years. Some of them left. I mean, we offered financial incentives. We had 100 and some take us up just on, basically we'll pay you if you want to not be on our team anymore. And some we had to let go for cause, whatever, lots of reasons. But man, if there had been, an organization that could say, and a smaller scale, most churches, it's like 1 person or it's like 2 people. But been able to come alongside that, because as a pastor, like the thing we have to think about most is our church. And sadly, or I don't know if it's sad or if it's just reality, if I let someone go for cause or I can't afford them anymore, like the next day after that conversation, I got to be thinking about how to protect the church. I got to be thinking about love the church. I got to be thinking about how to help that church move forward. And you can have the best intentions of we're going to walk alongside you and your family, and we're going to love you, and we're going to stay in connection, whatever. But you forget, and you get distracted, and it's not your number one job, because your number one job is next Sunday and kind of just getting through or leading the church. And so so it's amazing. Like I only know like a small bit of what you guys are doing, but when I was looking through your website again the other day, I was thinking, like, I don't know anyone else doing that part of it.
Yeah. Well, I think that was the reason that Bill called me up one day and said, I have an idea. And it's been redemptive and it's been good. I want people who need it to be able to connect with you and what you're doing. Who should be following and engaging with what you're doing at Leading Smart, and how did they do it?
And we're focused. When I started this, I thought, well, we'll work with nonprofits and businesses and churches. We're 100% churches. That's where I spent the last 40 years. And that's just kind of, so I shouldn't say 100, we're like 97% churches. So church pastors, lead pastors and executive pastors kind of are the core of who we, like when I'm writing articles, when we're writing books, ebooks, whatever, I'm like focused on the lead pastor and executive pastor. And there's a whole lot of people. And when I say executive pastor, anyone in a second chair seat at a church. So it's they're typically on the leadership team, directional leadership team, whatever that team's called, as a staff person. That's kind of who I'm thinking about when I'm focusing what I'm doing. So reach out to us, leadingsmart.com. If they go to the homepage, they'll see 2 things. One, they'll see like sign up for the newsletter. And I try to every Tuesday, on most Tuesdays, just put out new content. It just adds value to pastors. And then there's another button that says "Let's talk." So if it's like, hey, I think Tim and his team may be able to connect with us in some way, just hit that button. You'll just be tied right into my calendar, and you'll be able to plop a spot on my calendar. And we can chat and see if I can be helpful.
That's great. And Tim, thanks for joining us on the Life After Ministry podcast. We'll see you in Chicago, maybe for a pickleball game.
That'd be great.
Slice of pizza and a Cubs game. As you've heard, ministry transitions are rarely clean. There's usually a push and a pull, a calling forward and a letting go. And we're thankful for Tim Stevens. He's helped lead through some of the most complex and public transitions in the church world, including seasons at Willow Creek and as part of Vanderbloemen's national search work. And now through Leading Smart, he's coaching leaders and churches to prepare and to plan and to lead their teams with health. I encourage you to visit leadingsmart.com to explore his work and resources and executive pastor cohorts. And if you find yourself in the middle of a transition or you care about those who are, check out ministrytransitions.com. Whether you need career, coaching, counseling, or you want to join in and support our redemptive work, we would love to talk to you. This does not have to be the end of your story. It might just be the beginning of something better. Thanks for listening to the Life After Ministry podcast.